Well, hi everyone, welcome to Mark's Bikes. You see what I did there? Well, I'm just trying out some new ideas. After all, it has been 2 years and over 50 videos since I started the channel, and I've still only got like 675 subscribers. I should have thousands by now, so something needs to change. Well, it could be a new presenter, but I can't afford Richard Hammond, and so I'm thinking that maybe just a change of channel name instead. So Mark's 900 was great for 2 years, but I do talk about all sorts of things, and the content isn't going to change. It would just be making myself a little bit more generic and stop me from alienating potential subscribers who think I'm just about the Z. Of course, I'm going to keep the Z because that's the real star of the show. It's just a name change, but that's what I'm thinking right now. So, well, we'll see. Now, I'm going to have plenty of riding time to think about it some more, so I'll get back to you in a later video. Right, anyway, back to today, and I've now done nearly 15,000 miles on this bike. It's actually 14,250, and it's in for a service. So why didn't I wait for 15,000 miles? Well, simply because I'm just about to go off biking around Spain and France with the boys for a week, and I'll be halfway up a mountain or across a desert when this gets to 15,000. So I figured it was best to do it before I go. Also, I want to swap out the chain and sprockets, so again, best to do that ready for the journey. So here I am on the A38 going into Gloucester as I'm headed for Fraser's Motorcycles. Now, they used to be the Kawasaki dealer in these here parts, but for whatever reason they no longer do Kawasaki. However, I know them from previous services. I'm just going to stick with it. Now, I've got a mate of mine who now takes his Kawasaki to Completely Motorcycles in Cheltenham, and apparently they're brilliant, but I'd already booked when he told me about that, so Fraser's as it is. Right, I'm just going to stop at these traffic lights, but I can hear sirens behind me, so I'm just going to quick look around. There's an ambulance actually coming, so I'm going to pull over. This is what we do: pull over, let this ambulance past, and hope that whoever that is going to visit is going to be all right. So that was kind of exciting for a moment there. Right, on our way then. Let's continue on. Right, before I head in, there are a couple of things I did to the bike in preparation for the service. Now, that might sound a little bit odd, but let me just explain what I mean by that when I was back on the drive. Right then guys, before I take this in for its 15,000 mile service, there are just a couple of things that I need to sort out with the bike before I hand it over to Kawasaki. Now, the first thing I want to do is have a look at these front brake pads. So when I took it in for its last service, I'd already bought myself some EBC HH sintered brake pads that I was going to put on the front. Now, whilst it was in for its service, Kawasaki did that for me, and they put this exact type of brake pad on for me, so they've been on and these have been sitting on the shelf. So I don't want that to happen again, so what I'm going to do is whip those out, have a look at them. If they need changing, I'm going to change them, otherwise they're going to be sat around for another year. I'm just looking at the brake discs, the rotors. Very difficult to tell. I haven't got a vernier caliper or anything like that I can check how thick they are, but there's no lipping on these rotors or any signs of wear. I was a bit concerned that these are a bit harder than the normal brake pads and they'd wear these rotors out, but seem to be absolutely fine. So I don't think I'm going to need any new rotors, and as I say, I'll swap out the pads before I go in. As I've mentioned, I'm also, as well as the service, going to get the chain and the sprockets swapped out. It's only done 15,000 miles, this bike, but the chain will probably last a lot longer, but I've spent quite a bit of time attempting to pull wheelies, kind of snatching at the throttle and accelerating hard and all that sort of stuff. All of it takes its toll on the chain, and as I am about to go on a very long road trip, I figured that it would be best to swap it out rather than experience a broken chain in the middle of Europe somewhere where I'm going to have difficulty getting it replaced. Right. Now, the thing I'm going to do in preparation for this is all about this rear sprocket. Now, you might remember a previous episode where I looked at this and it was supposed to be like a polished steel finish on it, but over the time it had gone really rusty. I tried to clean it. It was a real mess and I just couldn't clean it up. It looked horrible. So I sprayed it black, and I didn't know if that was going to last. It has lasted. I think that sprocket, although it's quite dirty at the moment, I think that rear sprocket looks brilliant in black. If you're thinking about doing it, it's a really good move. No hesitations at all doing that again, so it looks really good in black. But what I also did was to swap out these nuts. So the original ones had gone really nasty and dirty and rusty, and I just could not clean these up. So I took them off and replaced them with some nice bright shiny stainless steel ones, and they've been fabulous ever since. So I've got this nice contrast between the stainless steel nuts and the painted black sprocket. I think it looks great, especially when it's clean, which, as I say, it's not at the moment. Now, What I don't want to do is take this in for a service, get them to replace the sprocket, and they also replace these nuts as well. So what I'm going to do is swap them out for the old ones, take it in for its service. When it comes back with a nice new sprocket, I might put the new ones back on, or I don't know if they actually swap out the nuts as well. That'll be interesting to see. So a bit of work to do there then. I'll swap out the front brake pads, have a look at the difference and see how much they've worn, and then I'm going to take these nuts off one by one and swap them with those. Pretty straightforward job, but I'll come back when it's finished. Now, I was a bit concerned when I put those brake pads on because I didn't think there was an awful lot of meat on the friction pads, and I wasn't sure how long they were going to last. But looking at the bike now, looking at those brake pads after several thousand miles, and I found that actually they haven't worn down that much. You can see by the picture here, but also they haven't really worn the brake rotors either, which is something I was warned about. But actually I'm really pleased with those brake pads, and whilst they don't actually really need changing right at this moment, as I say, I've got a set sitting on the shelf and I'm just going to end up losing them if I don't use them. Back to it then, and Frasers have agreed to give me a bike whilst mine is in, and I wonder what it could be. Well, the title of the video kind of gives it away, I expect, so let's just get in there and see how the shop looks without its old Kawasaki area. So as I pull up, my first impressions are they have a ton of bikes outside, more than I've ever seen here, so that can't be a bad thing. They're obviously doing well, and there's loads of part-used bikes of all shapes and sizes outside the shop, and inside they do Aprilia, Moto Guzzi, Vespa, Piaggio, Royal Enfield, Suzuki, Mutt, and even Peugeot. Now, I didn't even know Peugeot made bikes, but apparently they do a mean 125 scooter. Okay, I've parked up. Now I should really have reversed the bike in there, but that just increases the chances of me making an ass of myself, so I'll front it in, hop off the bike. We're going to have a look up and down this selection of bikes, and I've got to say there's some really nice stuff here. I always kind of look at these bikes and think, is there one here that I'd rather ride away on rather than mine? And generally there isn't, unless there's something like maybe an H2 or something like that, maybe a Street Fighter, but actually that Aprilia is quite nice at the end. I'd probably ride away on that one rather than mine, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, lots of nice bikes there, something for every taste. So I'm quite impressed with this place, I've got to say. Like I said before, never seen quite so much of a selection of bikes outside here. But what I've got to do is go and book in, give them my licence, and then pick up my hire bike for the day. I'm not sure which bike it's going to be. So what do you reckon to those Royal Enfields? I mean, I just can't make my mind up on that. I think I need to ride one of those. It'd be nice if that's my bike for the day, but I don't think it will be. Much more likely that it's going to be one of these SV650s. But let's get in there and find out. Of course it's an SV650, but I've got to say this one is a brand spanker. I think it's only done 300 and something miles, so that's a bit of a treat. And it's a very easy bike to ride. I mean, you just get on one of these, flick the key on and you're away, because there is nothing complicated about an SV650. Now, interestingly, I did do a review on this bike some time ago, it was well over a year ago now, because I brought the bike in for service, and as ever, they gave me an SV650, so I rode it around for the day and gave my thoughts on it. Now, the whole point of this channel is that it's a bit of an experiment, and what I wanted to do was tell people that I didn't like something, because you never see YouTube channels where people go, oh, this is horrible. Now, I'll give you a great example of this, right? The MT-09 is a fantastic bike, and the previous model of MT-09 was reviewed by just about everybody, and everybody said it was the perfect bike. It was the sort of light heavyweight bike to buy. And then when they brought out the new MT-09, the first review I saw on MCN said, this new MT-09 is brilliant, it's fixed all the problems of the old one. And I thought, well, the old one didn't have any problems. So with that in mind, I thought, well, I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to tell people what I really think about this bike, and to be fair, I didn't particularly like it. However, I realised at that point, after I'd released that video, why people don't say bad things about bikes. The backlash was outrageous. I guess the people that watched that video were the ones that typed SV650 into YouTube and therefore were interested in the bike. Perhaps they had one themselves, or perhaps they were looking at buying one. So of course, when some numpty like me is sitting on this bike going, oh, I don't like anything about it, clearly they're not going to be happy. So that's not really what I'm about. I took that video down, experiment done, didn't go particularly well. So this time around I'm going to give you an honest set of thoughts about this bike. I'm not going to compare it to a Z900, they're like chalk and cheese, apart from the fact that they're both naked bikes, they've not really got an awful lot in common, so that's not fair. And actually, even though I've only been on this bike a few minutes, I'm really enjoying it already, so there's lots of good things to say about it, and as I say, I'm going to be fair this time. So the first thing I've noticed about this bike, other than the fact that it's very easy to just jump on and ride, is the fact that when you go around a corner at low speeds, it drops into the bend very, very easily. Now, bigger bikes, particularly for an inexperienced rider, can be quite tricky going at low speeds around corners, but this thing, fantastic. I mean, it's just a breeze to ride, and cutting through traffic, going around bends, all that type of stuff, fantastic. You know, it would be the bike to choose if you've got a daily commute through busy streets such as this. The power level is more than adequate. I mean, I can just open the throttle, I can leave the traffic behind me at traffic lights and so on. It's, you know, it's got enough power to do what you want to. It will hold its own on a dual carriageway or a motorway, and obviously it's nippy enough to get through town. So actually, although I wasn't really going to talk about power levels and things, the speed, power, handling, all that side of it, it does exactly what it's supposed to do. The fuel consumption on one of these I know is fantastic. I can't remember the exact figures, I might flash them up on the screen. So it's cheap to run. The insurance is going to be fairly cheap, being only a 650. Parts are easy to come by because they've sold these things in the millions. So you can see where I'm going with this. This is an inexpensive bike to own and to maintain and to ride. The one thing is, of course, you'll pay the same amount of vehicle tax as you would do for a 1200 or some massive great motorbike, because of the, certainly in Britain, the laws are that anything over a 600 is taxed at the same rate, which is bargain. I've talked about that before. So you're not going to save any money on tax, but in all other respects, I think you are going to have inexpensive motoring. So who would buy a bike like this? Now, a lot of people call it a beginner's bike, and quite frankly, I find that really patronising and just wrong. So in my head, right, if you've passed a bike test and you've got a level head on your shoulders, you're a sensible sort of person, then really you can ride whatever you want. Right, you can go and buy a Fireblade if you want, because you're only going to ride it as fast as you want to. And as I say, if you're sensible enough, you're not going to ride like a nutter. So if you're the sort of person that's thinking, I need an SV650 as my first bike, you're probably sensible enough to buy whatever you want. So I think this idea about it's a beginner's bike is a bit daft. So I'm not going to say this is a beginner's bike. In fact, most of the people that ride them definitely aren't beginners. But what I would say is that this is an inexpensive bike. So if you're getting back into biking and you're wondering if you're going to enjoy it and you don't want to spend too much money initially, or if you've just passed your test, you don't know if you're going to stay on a bike forever, or you only want to use it every now and then and you want something cheap to run, this is the bike for you. Apparently there's also quite a big racing scene for these as well, so if you did want to take it onto a track, I'm sure that in its class it would be a winner. So as far as bikes go in this class, it's a really tough act to beat, or at least it has been for the past number of years. Now we have a swathe of new bikes in the same class. So we've got the MT-07, the CB650, the CB750 Hornet, Suzuki's own GSX-8S, the Tuono 660, Kawasaki Z650, Trident 650 and the Street Triple 675. Now, have I forgotten any? Apologies if I have. Right, well, all of those bikes I've just listed are really good, and if I was in the market for a bike in this category and wanted something down the line sensible and best value for money, then it's still the MT-07. But for something a bit special, it has to be the Tuono. That's just me. You see, purely on aesthetics, I've never really liked the look of a V-twin in a trellis frame on this or on the Ducati Monster. However, if you do like it and you think this bike looks great, well, now's the time to get one. I mean, Ducati don't do the trellis frame anymore, and with the GSX-8S coming along, I don't reckon this one will be around for much longer. Ultimately, it's a bike that will be looked back on with great fondness by very many people, so it's definitely a future classic. Grab one now while you can. Now, I've genuinely enjoyed spending the day with this bike. We've been all over the place, towns and countryside, but it's time to head back and get back on the Z, and let's see what the damage is for a 15,000 mile service, along with a new chain and sprockets. Here we are then, back on the Z. Got to say, it's always nice to get back on your own bike, isn't it? Anyway, the scores on the doors for this 15,000 mile service, plus a chain and sprocket, came in at a total of £552. Now, the breakdown of that is that the chain and sprocket, which is an RK chain, now I've looked up RK chains, and this does appear to be one of the better ones, so that's good news. So that was 130 quid for that kit, plus 70 quid to fit it. So overall, the rest of it, so the other £352, was all about the service. So they did obviously oil filter, there's a new sump plug washer that they put on, also a disposal of all the kit, and a set of spark plugs as well. So yeah, as I say, all that came to sort of 352 quid, so £552 altogether. So I'm happy with that. I mean, I would have needed to buy a load of kit to fit the chain properly myself anyway, so at least now as well I've got peace of mind that it has been fitted properly, and I'm not going to be riding through Europe and see my chain come barreling past me on the road because it hasn't been fitted correctly. Anyway, let's get home, have a closer look at this chain, see what it looks like, and see if they did actually swap out those sprocket nuts or not. So back on the drive, and here's my nice new chain. So first thing I want to do is check that tension. They've done that really nicely, so that gives me some level of confidence that this has been fitted well. And they've used the old sprocket nuts that they put back on there, so they're going to have to come off, and we'll replace them with a nice new shiny ones. So the chain itself, gold colour. I'm not sure how I feel about that really, because there's nothing else on the bike that's gold. But I suppose it looks all right, and they have covered it in a kind of grease. I don't know quite what they've used as a chain lubricant, but it's really nice. So really happy with that. Well worth the 70 quid to get them to fit it. Anyway, whether you've got an old chain or a brand new one like me, make sure you do keep those chains oiled, and I'll see you all soon.